Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Later in today's show, I'll be talking to Adrian Gilbert about his research into the ancient pyramids of Giza. Including this show, there are 3 more shows left in the current series. You may remember the show before last with Andrew Johnson, where we spoke about possible archaeology on other planets in our solar system. Now, today's show, covering the pyramids and the final 2 shows in this series, should be considered together. Next week's show is about the secret space program, and the final show is about the electric universe. There is overlap with these 4 shows, and when you consider them together, I think it brings a clearer understanding of the reality we inhabit. So stay tuned. Now today I'm launching details of the Rich Planet 2019 UK speaking tour. I'll be visiting 12 venues throughout the UK, so hopefully I'll be coming to one near you. Please check the Rich Planet website for details of venues and how to get tickets. I'll be putting out details of the subjects to be covered later in the year. Now, a few months back I was alerted to this story in Mail Online from the 26th of August 2018. Before I explain what this article is about, here is a clip of me talking about this in 2017. So I'm just going to give you an example here of what looks to me like a fabricated terrorist attack, which happened recently, 2016, last year. So this was reported in Mail Online. It was reported by Reuters and the Associated Press. Car bomb kills at least 8 in Baghdad market. So here are some photographs from the Daily Mail. It states that the bomb killed at least 10 and wounding many. Killed at least 10 and wounding many. So this is where the car is supposed to have been that they blew up. Killed at least 10 and wounding many. Now what I'm about to show you was all exposed on this website, bellingcat.com. So there's a lot more detailed information which proves what I'm about to say is correct, if you want to check it out. Now, this car bomb attack was filmed by this CCTV camera. So the car in question was parked just there where you see this blackness on the wall there. And they've verified that this is definitely the same site. So this is an RT news report of this car bomb attack. And people have identified these gates on this wall and the various trees. Here are some photographs from Mail Online. So it's all been identified. It's definitely the video of this car bomb attack, which killed 10 people. So here's the CCTV camera, and I'm going to show you the footage of a car bomb attack which killed 10 people. So here's the car. There's a guy next to it. There's a guy in a pickup truck here just getting in. So he's done something to the car, or he's been out the car and he walks to the pickup truck. So there's at least 2 guys in that car. Okay, that looks like a real explosion to me. So I would say that there's possibly military-grade explosives being made available to someone who's put them in there. On come the injured. This guy's up for an Oscar. This guy's up for an Oscar. So we've got another vehicle, a guy getting out. So we've got 2 vehicles, a number of operatives. So in order to get people to do this, I would suggest they would have been paid. We've got 2 vehicles, we've got real ordnance, so quite a lot of organising to do this. And this appeared in the mainstream media very shortly after it happened. So you've got to ask the question, well, are the people who are hoaxing these things linked to the people who are putting it in the media? And I've suggested it's a safe bet that they are. Now, that video of me talking about this incident has had over 39,000 views on my YouTube channel. I showed that same video of the fake bombing again in my 2018 lecture tour, and that video has had nearly 50,000 views. People also re-upload my videos on their own YouTube channels, so I would say that public awareness over the last 12 months of this fake event has been raised and is probably now into the hundreds of thousands in the UK. So now, strap in tight for mainstream media's attempt to explain this fake event. Fake bombs and actors playing dead. So they are now admitting that the story they reported on as a bomb killing 10 people did not kill anyone. They are admitting their original story was bogus. Here comes the funny part. How Iraqi spy infiltrated ISIS and scuppered their terror attacks in an act that saved hundreds of lives but cost him his own. Heroic double agent Captain Harith al-Sudani was executed in January 2017. That means we can't speak to him. He was a mole from Iraq's little-known Falcon intelligence cell who penetrated the highest ranks of Islamic State by posing as a jihadi transporting bombs, considered one of Iraq's greatest spies, like one of Iceland's greatest cricketers or Brazil's greatest snooker players. He foiled 30 vehicle explosion attacks and prevented 18 suicide bombings. On a day when 4 bombs had already rocked Baghdad, a car parked up in a back street laden with explosives ready to cause more carnage. Soon afterwards, thick black smoke rose skywards and victims lay scattered on the floor. Some looked dead, others injured, screaming for help as they clung to life. To any locals who stumbled across the scene, it was one of sheer horror. But all was not as it seemed, for when the car exploded, the street was empty. Only after the device detonated did the wounded run in, taking their positions like well-trained actors. The payload of the original bomb had been replaced by a much smaller device, designed to deceive rather than destroy. The ruse was the work of Captain Harith al-Sudani, a mole from Iraq's little-known Falcon intelligence cell, who managed to penetrate the highest ranks of Islamic State. When the footage was taken in 2016, he was 14 months into one of the world's most dangerous undercover operations. As he posed as a jihadi, his job with the terror group was to transport bombs to specific targets before detonating them. But in reality, the father of 3 was handing them over for his team to disable and then faking explosions and casualties so that IS leaders believed their sick plots had succeeded. If you believe that crock of utter crap, then you ought to be diagnosed with the mental health condition of UTSD, unable to see deception. It's quite simple what happened. A fake bombing was reported by mainstream media as a real bombing. They didn't realise there was a CCTV camera running in this rundown part of Baghdad, so they were caught red-handed. Once their disgraceful manipulative activities had been exposed, they needed to concoct another lie to try and cover up their original fake bombing. This is the kind of story that should be being exposed on programmes like Have I Got News For You or Mock the Week. Everyone who appears on these shows, however, suffers from UTSD, unable to see deception. So even if they did cover it, it would probably be assumed to be a true story. But this is just so flimsy that even sycophantic system servers like Ian Hislop surely would see through it. Now, I think the reason why this event is so important is that it proves fake terror attacks are being concocted by covert operatives and mainstream media are used to report fake terror attacks as real terror attacks. Another clear example of this was the Boston bombing. As we know, there have been a number of terror attacks reported on UK soil over the last few years, and we need to always bear in mind that they have and do set up fake terror events and report them as real. Now, I often hear the subject of cryptocurrencies being discussed, and when Bitcoin first came out, I received quite a lot of correspondence asking me to promote the concept of Bitcoin. Now, some people seemed to think it was the answer to tackling the power of the centralized monetary system. It was a decentralized currency without any organization controlling it. I seem to be getting less of those emails now, however. I've always been skeptical of cryptocurrency. It's not a subject that you can get to the bottom of in 10 minutes. The mechanism by which bitcoins are created is not easy to understand. A friend of mine is a chartered accountant and runs a medium-sized company, and one of his accountants has an interest in cryptocurrencies and tried to gain an understanding of what's really behind it all. So I asked him a few questions in an email recently. Now this next section, if you're going to understand it, you'll probably need to follow some of the links on the screen and do considerable background reading. Here are the points that I raised to him to give his informed opinions on. 1. It is fiat money. It has no intrinsic value. So he gives a definition: a common currency issued by a central issuing authority which guaranteed to pay the owner to the value and also has a lack of intrinsic value. So he says arguments against: there is no trust-based central authority which is able to change the supply of the bitcoins which are being released, i.e. it is scarce, and because of the decentralized nature, it means that no one central person or authority can change the rules. It is impossible to restrict transactions between parties, i.e. it's censorship resistant. The mining process involves proof of work, i.e. you need to prove that you've done the maths to be awarded bitcoins. In the same way that mining gold requires work, you could argue that the work or energy expended results in value. So I would say, in my view, that this invalidates one of the components of the fiat currency. However, the intrinsic value part is open to debate, because today there are no expected future income values from owning a bitcoin in the way that a share in a company may have, which can be used to derive its present value. Some say that the ability to have censorship-resistant value transfer is the intrinsic value itself. Number 2, it's not clear whose idea it was. He says this is true. Satoshi Nakamoto is an unknown entity. The wide belief is that Satoshi was a person or group of people likely to be one of the group of cypherpunks around at the end of the 90s. Most people in Bitcoin tend to think that the creator was Hal Finney, deceased but received the first Bitcoin transaction, or Nick Szabo created BitGold, both whom knew of the contentious nature of creating a competitor to state-owned money. I tend to think this is the most likely scenario given what I've read about the work of these individuals. However, Bitcoin is based upon an encryption called SHA-256. SHA-256 encryption was created by the NSA. The Tor network, or onion routing process, was largely developed by DARPA in 1997. In 1996, the NSA created the following paper on cryptographic electronic cash. Good read for the critical thinker. Follow this link. So I think it would be fair to say that the US intelligence agencies have an interest in cryptographically secure networks and could be the unknown entity. Clearly speculation that they in fact are Satoshi Nakamoto, and seemingly impossible to prove, but certainly possible, and I guess the motive might be to create either a testnet project to see if they could release their own digital ledger, which would be useful in the war on cash / voyeurism of the central authority. Alternatively, it could be used as a channel to exploit their own misdemeanors. It's a common misconception that Bitcoin is anonymous. The ledger is completely visible and verifiable to the public, so I would suggest that there would be a paper trail that would lead to the conversion of the bitcoins back to US dollars at some point. So I'm edging on the side of it not being an NSA project, but it could be. Number 3, the way more bitcoins come into existence is complex and difficult to understand. Yes, this is true. Cryptography is complex and requires a higher than average IQ to understand, but mechanical engineering is complex and difficult to understand. But this does not invalidate its uses or assumptions. i.e. if I get on an aeroplane, I don't personally validate its engineering or build quality before I get on board, because I rely on better educated people to do that for me. Fortunately, there are people out there who do verify the publicly available code, and if it were to change, the nodes which verify the transactions would choose to accept or reject the new code. There are so many people checking each version of the code that it would be rejected should it fundamentally change to the detriment of the users. If you want to understand more on the way it works, this is an excellent video. Number 4, I wonder if the central banks are really behind this. I've given my view on it potentially being the NSA. One alternative criticism that comes about is that there is a core of developers, Blockstream, working on the project. They are not the only people coding, and anyone can contribute or propose code changes which may or may not be accepted by the community. However, they have been the main contributor to fundamental changes recently. Like with anything, it's useful to know who is funding these people to understand if there is anything untoward going on, and indeed there are a lot of criticisms here. And it is one of the main arguments that caused a chain split and the creation of Bitcoin Cash, which runs code more akin to the original code, although there are other issues with that project in itself. Here are a list of the people funding Blockstream team. You will note that AXA are on the list. I don't personally think the central banks were behind the original implementation, as by design it would compete with central banks. Central banks are private entities, and I think this would be more likely a private project or an NSA project, but I do not think it's beyond the realms of possibility that the central banks would try to sabotage the efforts. There are many other theories as to where it came from. Someone from the future, an AI entity, or even some form of otherworldly entity that wants to free us from our debt masters. Number 5, how come the vast majority of countries have not opposed its use? By countries, I'm assuming you mean governments and not banks. Most countries have at some point opposed its use in some regulatory form or another. The main point of friction at the moment comes with banking institutions making it extremely difficult for fiat on-ramps exchanges to have banking facilities, mainly because of the risk of money laundering. Indeed, the governments appear to be moving in the opposite direction. The CBOE and CME in the States recently allowed futures trading to go ahead, and they are looking at allowing ETFs, which will allow institutional investors to enter the space. The arguments would be that the governments are just letting the technology and other crypto assets develop as a wait and see. It's largely unstoppable technology, and if they are successful, they don't want to be left behind. And let's face it, it's another form of tax revenue for them, so they might as well take it for that for the time being. Is it really decentralizing the origination of money? This question, I am assuming, is asking about where the money comes from, which is the mining process. Once the Bitcoin is mined and sold by the miners, I do believe that it is decentralized at that point. One of the issues with Bitcoin is that the mining or transaction verifying is extremely competitive, and there is a barrier to entry being the cost of the equipment, the production of the equipment itself, and the cost of the energy to run the miners. There is an over-centralization of all of this in China. Bitcoin is secure to the extent that if no one entity controls more than 50% of the hashing power, the transactions cannot be compromised. Theoretically speaking, it's possible that a 51% attack on the network could occur, and one entity with control or a quantum computer could mess the transactions up by double spending the money. I would find it much more decentralized if anyone with any spare processing power could join the network and contribute to the mining. Having said all of that, should an attack on the network occur, the time it occurred would be isolated and the blockchain would be rolled back by consensus of the node's users. Also, because the miners are the ones creating the bitcoins, they do end up owning a lot of bitcoins. if they don't sell, and you could argue that one of the components of having control is by having the most of an asset. I will point out that Satoshi Nakamoto has the most, 1 million of the coins. I do believe mining is currently decentralized because what happens in practice is that the entities that are conducting the mining are often actually a group of individual miners who pool their resources. Number 7, is it a scam or a bubble? I do not believe it is a scam. I do believe we just witnessed a speculative price bubble. This has happened many times before in Bitcoin's history, although this was the biggest in terms of value increase. It was the smallest in terms of multiple increase. You might suggest that it is a bit of a Ponzi scheme, where people ultimately fall foul to the great fool theory. This could be true, but I do not think this is the case. There is ultimately a huge network of individuals who all have the ability to pass value from one to another without any central authority being able to stop them. People know that Bitcoin is scarce at 21 million, and that what they have cannot be taken away or manipulated by someone else, unless there is backdoor in the encryption. The origin of Bitcoin is certainly where the biggest questions are for me. I think it has value because of the reasons aforementioned, and fundamentally, people are more bothered about their privacy and are sick of central government control and its ability to seize our assets. If you look at the people who speak foul of cryptocurrency, it tends to be the mainstream media, the central banks, and other financial institutions. And that's good enough of an indicator for me. Did you understand all that? I didn't either. Now, before you watch the next part with Adrian Gilbert, I want to make a point about religion. When people on this show mention religion, some viewers will turn off. There's no tangible proof that the gobbledygook written in holy books is based on reality. It's just myths written down to control people. Why are you wasting your time talking about it, Richard? I have some sympathy with that view. However, in my opinion, people like Adrian Gilbert don't study religion for the same reasons somebody in the church studies religion. If you go back to the start of Christianity and look for clues as to where the ideas came from, it is clear that it is based on myths that are much older than Christianity. In particular, Egyptian religion and the worship of all things celestial. Although religion now in the 21st century seems very woolly and based on little evidence, was this the case thousands of years ago when religions were first set up? I don't think so. I suspect religion was a very different thing in the distant past. I suspect some of it is describing real physical activities that actually took place, and that the ancients knew things about science and nature that we don't. What we see in religion today is a remnant, leftovers, and the tales of something that was once more real, tangible, and provable. So when Adrian speaks about the Egyptian religion and its interaction with certain deities that came to the earth, you have to consider that they could be describing physical interaction with other worlds. But the knowledge of how to achieve that interaction has been lost. So bear this in mind when you listen to Adrian Gilbert in part 2.